dealt with various symptoms and a changing menstrual cycle for 5 straight years as I transitioned to menopause. It helped me so much to become educated on what I could do and help get through these crazy symptoms that I was having. I recently had the pleasure of learning even more when I got to sit down and talk with Candace Burch, who specializes in helping her patients get down to the root causes of symptoms and hormonal imbalances. So stay tuned as I share this helpful interview. Hi, I'm Natalie Up, owner of Fired Up Fitness and the creator of the Mom Bod Tune-Up. On this channel, I help midlife women improve their transition through menopause with tips on natural hormone support and weight loss to look, feel, and live better. If this sounds like you, be sure to subscribe and share this video with your friends. Welcome, Candace Burch. Okay, well, it's so great to have you on today, Candace. I've got a list of questions that I want to ask. And I think that a reason why I wanted to have you on was because for some reason, we go through 8 to 10 years of perimenopause, but nobody's really teaching us what's happening. I mean, I myself, had issues 35, 38-ish. And, you go to your normal gynecologist and they're like, oh, you're probably just depressed. And, here's an antidepressant and go on birth control. And I'm like, but I'm not depressed. And I knew that, but anyways, there's definitely a disconnect. So on my channel, I'm really trying to educate and, help people out with this. And I even for myself, I noticed because I officially hit menopause in March of this year, right day after I turned 49. And I just out of curiosity, I was like, because so many people are like, oh, I'm starting these cycle changes and so forth. And I went back to see how long I had like weird cycles and so forth. And it wasn't, I used to track it in the app's Clue. And it was actually 5 full years of kind of the different cycles. And it was all the stages. It was like closer together than farther apart and missing and all that stuff. So anyways, of course. I think, there's so many changes and I'm just so thankful that you're here to help us.
I will do my best.
Yeah. So, as you know, but our listeners don't know that I just was able to do a full hormone panel testing with you, a few weeks ago. And you brought up some of the things in our discussion afterwards, looking at my results, some things that were happening with my hormones. And one of those is, well, actually, before we get into that, can you just give a quick summary of kind of what's happening in, that perimenopause time period and all these changes, like what's happening when we hit, right before we hit menopause?
Well, there's a roller coaster happening. You're riding a roller coaster. And some women are on that roller coaster and want to get off and can't get off. And other women who are perhaps less stressed and have perhaps a healthier diet or don't over exercise. The different variables in what women are doing that can determine how rough that roller coaster ride gets. But the reason for, a lot of women don't know that they're in perimenopause. That's a very confusing time. Like they move from a period where many women have cycles that are like clockwork, and they'll say, but my period was always like clockwork, and now suddenly I don't know when it's coming and it's all over the place, and I'm at work and I have an accident and I'm in the middle of a meeting and what the hell is going on, or I'm getting hot flashes, or night sweats. I never had belly fat and now I have belly. So all of these things sort of seem to come out of the blue. And what's really happening is this evolution towards the menopause, but that lead up is 8 to 10 years, because which just sounds really, oh my God, no, but it's a process. It's a transition. You got to, as we say, go with the flow and it's possible to do that. But what's really happening is that, as we grow older, as we get through the peak of our reproductive years, especially around like our 40s, mid 40s, our ovulation becomes erratic. our ovaries are starting to pack their bags, you know? I mean, I'm not saying they're going to become defunct, but they are readying themselves for the end of periods, the end of ovulation. And that readiness and that process takes a while. And, you know, in that process, what happens is that the hormones start to, so our ovulation's becoming erratic. That means ovarian hormone production, which was like clockwork if you had regular periods. You know, first phase of the cycle is all about estrogen, second phase is all about progesterone. Suddenly we're not having these nice cycle phases, and our hormones start to fluctuate. So along with erratic ovulation, hormones are becoming erratic too. So we start to have ups and downs. And one of the reasons for this is because of the fact that ovulation becomes less reliable. We can't depend on the production of progesterone upon ovulation. When we ovulate is primarily when our bodies make progesterone. And progesterone is key to feeling balanced and calm and sleeping and not becoming estrogen dominant, because progesterone is all about balancing, keeping estrogen in check, and also keeping us calm and helping us to sleep, and promoting the precursor hormone for the adrenal glands, which regulate blood sugar and the sleep-wake cycle and our immune response. Now, the reason that progesterone has to keep estrogen in check is because estrogen is a very potent growth hormone. When we tested you, and we test most women's, we always test estradiol. It's the most potent of the 3 estrogens that women's bodies make. We make estrone, which is a storage form of estradiol, and we make estriol, which is a weaker form, but it's estradiol that we need to know about. It's the hormone that made us female. You know, it grew our female organs, and it's the hormone that in that follicular phase is thickening the lining of the uterus, the uterine lining, the endometrium. So estrogen is growing that lining that we shed as a period, that blood-rich lining, and it's growing the egg and the follicle. So it's all about growth. And upon ovulation, progesterone comes in to say, okay, you grew the egg and the follicle, you thickened the lining enough already. We don't need you to keep growing things, because, you know, when estrogen continues to grow things, it starts to grow cysts and fibroids and endometriosis and heavy, horrible periods, because the lining keeps thickening. So these hormones have to be there in synchrony. They work together. It's not just estrogen and progesterone, but when you talk about perimenopause, those 2 master female hormones are what start to fluctuate and cause all the trouble.
One way I was taught that always sticks in my head, the difference between the 2, they're like sisters. Estrogen is though kind of the crazy, outgoing, wild sister, and then you've got progesterone, the other sister, that's calm and likes to stay home and more chill. And then she's like, no, we can't go out every night. Like, you have to come.
Yeah,
we're staying in tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sisterhood. It really is. You can't have one with that, you know, what's that song? You can't have one without
the other. Right.
All of these hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, and all the cortisols, morning, noon, evening, bedtime, that we measure in a test, interact. They are absolutely interdependent. So, you know, you think of a seesaw. If you got one hormone that's way up here, then there's another hormone that's way down here. Remember when you were a kid and somebody banged you at the bottom, and, you know, or you're high as a kite, and then you're suddenly boom. So it can be that bad. I mean, I've talked to women that describe perimenopause as sort of Jekyll and Hyde mood swings.
Oh, I've heard that too from plenty of people. Yeah.
Not fun. I mean, you know, it can really, and I myself was terrorizing my children when I was 48. And when my perimenopause really hit hard, I started having hot flashes every 20 minutes, which is not an exaggeration. And in between every hot flash, I was having mood swings. And what was I doing? I'm a journalist, I'm a health educator, but I did a lot of journalistic work, and I was living on deadlines. So I would stay up all night because I had little kids. So I was pulling all-nighters. What was I doing in the morning? Drinking too much coffee. So my roller coaster was a lot worse. Coffee on an empty stomach, not eating. And I had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, because I started late with parenthood.
Oh my God.
There was
I
that
cannot
day,
imagine.
there was that morning when my little Ryan, who was, I think, 3, is looking at me with her huge blue eyes, flooding with tears, like
Oh.
looking at me like she didn't know who the hell I was. And I realized, I looked at her and I thought, she's afraid of me.
Oh no.
Because I was just raging around. If I was having a hot flash, then everyone needed to put on a sweater in the middle of the winter. I'm sure. So, that's when I really sort of pricked up my ears and thought, okay, Candace, this is a hormonal thing. But as I was saying, a lot of women don't realize, or maybe they're in denial, or they just want to think, why are these changes what's happening? Why is this
Mhm,
happening? And like you mentioned, so many of them go to the doctor and they say, oh, it's just all in your head, or
mhm,
here's an antidepressant. And I don't know how many women have said to me exactly what you just said, but I'm
mhm.
not depressed. I like
Right.
my life. Okay. I don't
Yep.
need an antidepressant.
Yeah.
This is something else. And what it is hormonal.
Well, I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've heard these stories so many, oh my gosh, so much. And I've even heard, so many close friends and family of mine, and then they're like, I know I'm acting like a crazy person. I mean, they'll say, I know I'm being a crazy person, but I can't help it. Like it's like
Well, you
overthinking.
can't. I mean, it's almost true. It's
Yeah.
really like it's something comes over you, and that probably is the most distressing thing, this feeling of overwhelm and being out of control. And how many people say, but this isn't me. It's
Yeah.
not
Right.
me. I'm so mean. I feel unloving. I go into rages, and I'm usually happy-go-lucky and
Mhm.
pretty knowing what's happening. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
Really, it's a trauma.
Well, so beyond all of
Can be.
those like uneasy feelings, I guess. So one of the things that you pointed out on my test was my low progesterone to estradiol ratio. And you had mentioned when we talked after our tests how important heart health and bone health is, with those. And I see, new clients that will come to me in my initial consult and they're like, all of a sudden I have high cholesterol, or now I have heart palpitations, and now I need to, that now they are like, oh, now I got to go see a cardiologist and everything. But isn't that really like so much related to the hormones and why is like that ratio, for instance, you had talked about with me, what is the importance of like really paying attention to that heart and bone health, and with estrogen being more in that estrogen relative estrogen dominance, even though my estrogen is not, and my progesterone wasn't like low, it was in normal levels, but the ratio was off. So can you
Right.
go more into that?
Right. So actually the ratio is looking at the proportion of progesterone relative to estrogen. And to go back a bit, the first thing we're looking at when we're looking at a ratio that's low is that we're seeing that estrogen is in excess. There's not enough progesterone. It's the indication is there's not enough progesterone being made, probably because we're not ovulating every cycle, because ovulation is becoming erratic. But mind you, younger women who aren't in perimenopause also don't ovulate every cycle, especially if they're on birth control or they're going, have too much stress. Or there's all kinds of things
Sure.
that disrupt ovulation, like being, not getting enough protein or good fats into your diet, overtraining,
Mm-hmm.
being overbooked, overcommitted, overworked. All of these things can disrupt ovulation big time. So when we look at a low ratio, the first thing we're looking at is too much estrogen. And that is going to cause the estrogen dominant issue is that we're going to gain weight. The estrogen fat pattern is hips, bottom, thighs. And of course, weight gain is linked to metabolic syndrome and insulin, inflammation. And that is, when you get the visceral fat around the stomach and all the organs, that is a risk for heart disease, of course. You also are talking about bad PMS. So we're talking about irritation, irritability, anger, rage. None of that can be good for the heart. And that's also jacking up serum cholesterol. When you're type A and you're out of sorts and you're just kind of at a, in a state of just constantly feeling agitated and aggravated, that also jacks up cortisol levels, which are the stress hormone levels, which are going to affect the function of the heart. But estrogen dominance is really about weight gain, mood swings, bad PMS, heavy painful periods because there's too much estrogen around. It's more the low estrogen when progesterone and estrogen are both sort of at low levels that we have to start really looking at the heart issues. What I should go back up and say is too much estrogen is going to be linked to cholesterol increases, etc.
Okay.
But estrogen is also protective of the heart. So we want the right amount of estrogen because, you know, cholesterol is the backbone of all hormones in fact. So we need cholesterol. And when people are put on cholesterol lowering drugs, they start to have very low levels of estrogen. And then that can be a risk for heart disease as well, because we need enough estrogen to protect the heart rhythm, to protect the flow of blood through the vessels, you know, to balance all of that out, and also to protect our bones and all of that. So in either way you look at it, too much estrogen is going to put us at risk for heart disease because of weight gain, obesity, fat in the wrong places that is creating inflammation. And on the other end, low estrogen, when those hormones are fluctuating from high to low, you know, you got high estrogen, then progesterone's low, then estrogen's low, and they're going back and forth. Then you start getting palpitations. A lot of people that feel anxious, actually, they think they have really bad anxiety, but sometimes that's because their estrogen is actually low or fluctuating. And that's a strong link to heart palpitations. So you feel your heart racing.
I've had that in the past.
And you feel like you're anxious, or you feel like you're having a panic attack.
Right.
But actually, almost everyone that I've talked to that has a low estrogen has a feeling of anxiety, feeling out of sorts. Other symptoms of low estrogen are things like memory loss, or not remembering why you came into this room, or losing your train of thought. Or I remember saying, remember talking to my girls, and I'd be talking and I couldn't think of the word. You know, everybody's hanging on the word. I couldn't come up with the word. So brain fog, memory loss, wrinkles, drying skin, vaginal dryness is a big thing with estrogen deficiency. The heart palpitations, breaking brittle nails, just dryness everywhere, dry hair, dry skin.
I feel like I've had, I mean, since I actually hit menopause, and since I'm sure my estrogen went lower, I mean, I am getting so much of that, like the skin and the hair. And I know it does, I know I have a lot of hair, but I feel like I'm even like, my hair is just breaking off right now. It's just, everything's just dry. It's dry for me.
Yeah. And your estrogen probably is, I can't remember, what was your estrogen? Was it? Yeah, your estrogen actually in your test result, I think it was in a healthy range.
It was in a healthy range, but probably not
very early into menopause.
Yes.
We should tell our listeners that menopause is officially defined as 12 sequential months in a row without a period. That's when you're officially, but you only just hit that just now after your 49th birthday. And so you're very early into this menopause. Your ovaries are still making estrogen. In fact, estrogen does not in any way plummet like progesterone does. With the end of ovulation, progesterone plummets. But estrogen can still be being made in fat cells. It's especially women who are overweight and obese are making estrogen. They're often estrogen dominant. Because there's an enzyme in fat cells called aromatase that actually converts testosterone into estrogen. So those women can become estrogen dominant, which again is putting them at risk for heart disease. And at the same time, their testosterone is being depleted because it's being turned into estrogen. This is a big thing for men to understand too, men that are overweight. Same thing is happening for them. So then their libido goes down, and their strength, and because that's all about strength and structure and endurance and cognition. But we can talk about those hormones a little later on.
So is there something that like I could do to help balance that estrogen dominance? I mean, like cruciferous vegetables and stuff. I mean, do you feel like that those do help, or like taking something like DIM, or I mean, do those things help?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're talking about that with your clients, that's really good information, because that is absolutely when you look at the pathways, there are three significant pathways that estrogens are metabolized down. They're called the detox pathways, and there's the 2, the 4, and the 16. And only one of them is a good pathway, and that's the 2 pathway. The other two are, one is actually leading to storage of estrogen, which we don't want, becomes a stored form estrone, and another one is actually carcinogenic. We can, in the physiology and in the science, they have seen that the active enzyme in cruciferous vegetables, sulforaphane, I never say that correctly.
I know, it's a mouthful.
Actually helps to promote metabolism of estrogens down the proper pathway, down the good pathway. So
And I've heard about people actually taking that as a supplement as well. Is that, I mean, do you ever?
Oh, absolutely. Because you have to eat, if you have a high estrogen level, or your estrogen is relatively high, relative to progesterone, it's not a bad idea to be using some DIM. It's not going to harm you.
I've done that in the past when I felt like earlier on in perimenopause, I definitely had some of these same things. And then I got myself all leveled out and I was like, yes, like I've done it.
Yeah.
Like I've mastered the perimenopause. And then
Yeah.
I think ever since I hit menopause, I'm like, I know, like the hot flashes, the night sweats are coming back. And now my hair, I'm like, what is happening?
It's not the only, DIM is not the only thing to do. And in fact, DIM is tricky because if your estrogen is low, and many women, like you, are very thin, and you look like you're quite trim.
I'm just naturally, yes, I'm naturally like this. So
thin women, fair women, small bone women, we all know they tend to be, at risk for osteoporosis, things like that, because their estrogen tends to be lower. And if you put that together with, especially as they get older, if you put that together with a diet that is not adequate in protein and good fats, which are the building blocks of hormones.
Which I'm very good at that.
Okay, good. My daughter, Jess, who Body Bliss by Jess, she's our in-house health coach. And she says that most of the women she talks to are not eating enough protein.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah.
We are. And you probably see that too. So all of these things, especially people who are on a plant-based diet, have got to understand how to combine proteins properly. Because so many of those people who are vegan, all good. The blue zones will tell most people living to be centenarians are often eating plant-based diets. So no harm done there, but you've got to get the proteins in. And so anyway, though all of those things can contribute to a low estrogen, but if your estrogen and too much DIM, too many cruciferous vegetables, you want to watch that with lows. But if your estrogen is higher, there's never any harm in eating broccoli, Brussels, all the crucifers. We're talking broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, cabbage, all that good stuff, and steamed, and cauliflower rice, and find nice ways to make it. Because some people go Brussels sprouts. Well, Brussels sprouts in an air fryer can be absolutely gorgeous and delicious.
For sure. My favorite way.
Get them real crispy and little hot red pepper flakes and all that. But,
and bacon.
Bacon, right on. But if your estrogen's high and you are really estrogen dominant, you want to possibly use DIM as well, because you'd have to eat a whole lot of, 2 pounds of broccoli a day. You can't eat enough cruciferous vegetables you can't out eat in excess of estrogen. That's a chronic situation. So that's where DIM comes in. And it's pretty good all around. It's just that if somebody's really low in estrogen, then you have to watch it, because it is metabolizing what estrogen you have. You don't want it to be so low. But you asked how to get your estrogen down and to get a better ratio. So I was talking about, that you want fats and you want proteins and you want, to have balanced estrogen. But also the key here can be the use of progesterone cream. A topical progesterone that is plant-based, and that gets into the discussion about bioidentical hormones are biologically identical to the hormones our own bodies make. They're made from wild yam, they're made from soy, they are a far cry from the synthetic pregnant mare's urine sort of hormone derivatives. These are natural, and we can use a progesterone cream in a very small Goldilocks dose to mimic what our bodies should be making, or to replenish when our levels are low, so as to bring that balance into a better place. So for you, for instance, your estrogen's okay, but your progesterone is kind of on the low side, you know, and the ratio was low. So you a bit of progesterone in the second half of your cycle when your body would have been making enough, and it's not now because you're in menopause and you're not ovulating, you can top up. And as I often say to women, you know, 100 years ago, we only lived to be 50. Now we're living to be 80, 90 years old. We can't be without, you know, we can't be running on empty. We can't be living in a state of hormonal imbalance, because these hormones run the show.
For sure. Moving on to the next question. So I talk to a lot of women that are feeling a lot of anxiety. And I know you kind of touched on this, but they're definitely overstressed. I know for me personally, like parenting in the high school years was horrific. I still have a junior, so I still have time to go, but then preparing and getting a kid off to college. I just sent my oldest off to college last month in August. But I find myself, and I've talked to other clients and friends, even like, and I don't know, maybe it was like leading up to this, doing this video, and I've never done an interview. I don't know what it is, but, or maybe it's just something else, but like the last few nights in particular, like I don't feel stressed during the day. And I know when you tested me, my cortisol was high at night, but the last 2 nights, 3:25 a.m. to the T, it's the weirdest thing. And I just shoot up out of bed and my thoughts are just racing. It's just like, oh my God. And then I have to like calm myself down to, you know, get back to sleep. So is that stress? Is that, because it's not like when I think back, oh, like what did I eat yesterday and the day before? I haven't had junk. I mean, like you know, low carb, high fat, like I've been doing all the things, right? And so what is that? Is that cortisol?
Probably. I mean, that's kind of the joke of when you're up at 3 a.m, call a friend because she'll be up too. Especially if you're in the, it's pretty common. I think it just has to do again with the lack of, you know, we're in this roller coaster time. We're not making enough of the progesterone hormone that promotes sleep. So progesterone is, you know, if it's low, we're not going to have that calming sound sleep. It's easy to wake up, and especially if cortisol is rising in the night, and that can happen instead of, you know, like your levels were high at night. So presumably they continue, there might be rising through the night and at some point wake you up. You know,
so
maybe
how do we stop that?
well,
Come on, Candace, give me the tips.
you have to
and I'm doing all the things for stress relief too. You know, it's like, I mean, I do this for a living, so I'm like, I just don't, what am I missing?
Well, I think some people, you know, a lot of it is, what are we doing towards the evening, like late afternoon, evening? Because the cortisol that follows the diurnal curve, it's sort of the circadian rhythm. The pattern we're looking for is that cortisol should be highest in the morning. So let's go back a bit. The adrenals make cortisol 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to get us out of bed and power us through the day, providing us with a steady state of blood sugar, which fuels the brain, which fuels the body. Hopefully we hum along, taking stress in stride. So the guy that cut us off in traffic or whatever it is, we don't have a meltdown because someone looked at us wrong, you know, that we can handle things and cope as we go. We don't crash during the day. We don't have to push ourselves. And then by evening, those levels should, you know, so morning, noon cortisol levels should be robust. In the morning, there's something called the cortisol awakening response. And that means that melatonin has dropped as light comes on. Melatonin, the sleep hormone, drops as the morning light comes on. Cortisol rises and you wake up and you're ready for your day and you're pumped and you're ready to go. And then it should kind of gradually drop, but still looking like high optimal in the noon. And then by evening, nighttime, we need to be sort of calming things down. And so if we're powering up, if we are, let's say, drinking, okay, let's take the basics, coffee, any kind of caffeine after 2 p.m., even if you're using B vitamins or adrenal adaptogens to support your adrenals, all that good stuff, those are energizing. So we don't want to do things as we get into the evening.
What about ashwagandha though? Like for
ashwagandha is a calming. That's a calming.
Okay,
herb.
okay. Because I did try that last night, but it still didn't. I mean, I take that in the morning. I just took an extra one at night, but.
Well, yeah, ashwagandha can be helpful, but there's a supplement called Cortisol Manager that I often recommend for women that has L-theanine in it and phosphatidylserine, different things that help to support and promote cortisol balance. Because there are just many things, like I notice my husband and I often, we eat too late. We're on our, we're working too late. Sometimes you're still on your computer at 7 o'clock.
That's definitely one of my problems.
Yeah. Maybe you're having wine, and maybe, when we eat late and we have wine late, that is all, you're nourishing yourself with food. So that's raising your blood sugar. If you're drinking wine also, that's raising your blood sugar even more. Than somewhere in the night that your blood sugar can crash, and that's going to wake you up, or your blood sugar can fluctuate and that will wake you up. And that's always if we're eating too late, or if we exercise too late in the day. It's better to exercise in the morning. You don't want to do vigorous exercise, your full workout in the late afternoon or evening. The other culprit is, the blue light that comes off the screens. How many people tell me they're playing Words with Friends, or if they can't sleep, they turn on their cell phone? No. That's what we don't want to do. The blue, anything, even we're watching television, then we're all watching television. Who isn't watching? There's so many great things on, but you got to use blue blockers when you're watching television. If you have sleep issues, you don't want to be on your computer, your laptop, or any kind of screens at all. Hopefully at least an hour or two before bed. I mean, there is a major, that is, I don't mean to say inevitable. So I'm having a menopausal moment. What's the word I'm looking for? It's essential. It's a non-negotiable that we cannot be on these screens. And I think the other thing is, when we're on our screens all day long, we're wired all the time. And that cortisol switch gets stuck on. So we're never kind of getting that lovely gradual curve. So really you have to dim that, as the day goes on. You don't want to eat too late. You don't want to be rushing around. You don't want to be drinking too much or eating too much sugar that's going to cause a blood sugar
I feel like
drop.
I'm doing all of those things. So it must be but I'm not. My husband watches TV every single night, until he goes to bed. But I do think that I used to have the blue blockers and I just got out of the habit. Do you guys like certain kind, or? I always go to, I can't remember which one, but when you go to the New York Times wire cutter, they have a good review of the best of the blue blockers. Okay.
I don't think they have to be that expensive, but if you have trouble sleeping and you are watching your favorite show, you want to don't be, some people are in bed with the television on in the bedroom. Television should not be in the bedroom.
That's what's happening.
Cell phones should not be in the bedroom. They should not be by your bedside, even just there. I can't even tell you how freeing and liberating it is to turn the damn thing off. Like, turn it off and just get it out of there. We just are so plugged in, and really cortisol levels are becoming chronically elevated at the wrong time of the cycle, the wrong time of the curve. We don't want high levels. And by the way, when cortisol is high at night, that's a real issue for women that are fighting with belly fat, because cortisol, because it works together with melatonin to regulate the sleep-wake cycle. When cortisol is high at night, it also affects appetite hormones, because appetite hormones also work on the sleep-wake cycle. Right. So you've got ghrelin, the hunger hormone, actually rises with a high night cortisol. So here you are hungry, and people who never feel full and who always sort of feel hungry, and you're down at the refrigerator at 3 a.m. with the door open looking to what can I eat? Or you got sugar cravings, or just this kind of this disordered eating is very much linked to high night cortisol as well. So that gets into a problem with women who are hungry all the time. They start to overeat. They just can't get a sense of that satiety, the satiation, because leptin, that hormone that tells you that you're full, has plummeted while ghrelin is rising. So all kinds of complications with that. So really it's about winding down, as the evening comes on, we're not looking at caffeine or too much sugar. We're dimming the lights. We're, getting the house like kind of calm and quiet, and we're not maybe reading on a Kindle or our cell phone. We're reading a real book. Like if you're in bed and you're reading, read a book. So the light is shining on the book, not in your eyes, Very subtle things like that. But I think we know what we're doing. I think people know that they don't know how to relax. We don't know how to relax. I think it's perfectly fine to be on these cell phones constantly. And, just got to check this thing. Or what about checking an email? I did this the other night because I'm in England. So right now for me, it's 8 o'clock, but it's the middle of the day at home. And I'm getting all these messages, and it's so hard not to check my cell phone, because I know that everybody else is doing, they're pinging me, and I need to start winding down, have my dinner, and, spacing out and not looking at my phone. Right. So I'm going to I'm telling everyone I'm turning this off. This is not, I just can't do anything past 8 o'clock. So I'm already breaking that rule by talking to you.
Well, we appreciate your sacrifice.
But the best of intention, but in general, we need to calm down. I often ask people, I think I said to you, make a list of the 10 things you love to do most in all the world that bring you joy and relaxation. Maybe one of those things is having a bubble bath, or, having your partner give you a massage or something. The key to this list is, that's an easy list to make, but when is the last time you had a bubble bath? When is the last time you had a candlelit dinner? When is the it's like, we need to look at what all those things we love to do. I've talked to women that say, I have a whole studio where I do painting and art, and I haven't been in there in 2 years. Or I love to sing, but I don't even sing in the shower anymore. Or, what's happening to us? Are we just
it's so sad? Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's that kind of thing. Bring back those things that calm you. Some people
bring back your oxytocin. You got to increase that love hormone.
Yeah. And it's hard when your kids, I know when my daughter went to college, that first week, I walked into her bedroom and I just was sort of like, oh, just,
and then the worry. I think it's the worry, the anxiety of just like, and I don't want to be like a helicopter parent, but it's just this day and age. We know so much that's going on. I wish I knew nothing. Like if I knew nothing, I'd probably be better off, like my mom would be like, I wouldn't see me for 8 hours in a day, like on a weekend. We would just be running around, who knows where, they would have no idea.
I know. And actually, when my daughter and I are on podcasts, she's often revealing things about, when she's talking about her journey, she's revealing things that she did in college. I'm going, oh, really? That's interesting. Who knew? Certainly not me. I was the last person to know. Another thing I should mention about the up at 3 a.m. Please don't, turn on the computer and the cell phone, and start doing some breathing. You had mentioned there's that Andrew Weil breathing, the Wim Hof breathing, the Bach breathing. Inhale for the count of 4, or maybe you hold for the count of 7, 4, 7, 8, and then exhale. That works. Really.
And I use that to go to sleep. So I was going to ask you about sleep next, because my husband, I love him to death, but one of the things, he thinks, even though I do this for a living, he thinks sometimes it's all like, quackery or something. I don't know. He doesn't really get it, because he's not a woman going through all of these things either. But like, I'm like, no TV, turn the TV off. And he's like, nope, I'm watching my show, and I've got my eye mask on. I'm doing my 4, 7, 8. And I'm like thinking about my gratitude of the day. I'm trying to do all this while he is still watching his stinking shows and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so, and he will say, oh, you have no problem falling asleep, which I agree. I can get to sleep pretty good. It's just I had been sleeping really well. It's just recently that I think that cortisol is it's spiking high in the middle of the night. So I was going to ask, like, what are your tips for somebody who, I know that there's differences of helping somebody when they're having issues falling asleep and like turning their brain off versus people that are like me, that are like, they can get to sleep, but then they're not staying asleep. So what are your kind of recommendations for the two different types of
Well,
sleep
it
issues?
sounds like you've got the TV in the bedroom.
Oh gosh, yes. It's so annoying. It really is.
You must have to put earplugs in. That would
Well,
be my
I thought
tip.
about literally last night. I thought, I think next I'm gonna have to buy
Noise
some
canceling.
earplugs.
You're there with your mask and your noise canceling headphones. And but really, you have to have quiet. I think the TV, I mean, it would be best
It's
if
rough.
yeah, you got to work that out. If that could be in another room, and because it's this ambient noise there, and you're aware of
Yeah.
it. So the awareness is there. And I mentioned all the things that have to be done to get to the calm place. But let's face it, we do have issues falling asleep. As we get older, melatonin levels drop. Melatonin can be helpful. It is the master sleep hormone, and we can test people's. It's a urine test, but we can test the sleep wake cycle, the melatonin that should be high during the night and the cortisol that should be low. We can test that. But if you're low in melatonin, a bit of melatonin can help. 1 to 3 milligrams is usually the sweet spot. Making sure that your room is dark. It has to really be dark. You got to have dark, there's even done, I remember at ZRT when we started that sleep testing, we were reading, doing all the research, and it said that even a little bit of light coming through the curtains in the bedroom can, like a street light coming through the curtain. So black, if you have trouble sleeping, yeah, you want a mask, you want not black curtains, but blackout shades or something like that. There's also, melatonin. There are sound machines. I like the DOM machine where white noise. I remember when my daughter Jess we used to call her Jezebel Decibel. We used a white noise machine, but
and we'll do a fan for that reason. Like I have to have a fan
or
even
white
if
noise.
it's freezing, I will put a fan on just for that.
Right, and you want to make sure the covers aren't too hot and all of that. But in the end, hey, I mean, some people need melatonin. Some people, I think, tinctures of ashwagandha. Anybody that has problems sleeping is probably low in magnesium. And if you are especially and if you're also a person that has chocolate cravings and feels anxious and you don't sleep well, you are probably definitely low in magnesium. And there's a huge number of people that are, because the soil is denatured. I mean, you can't eat enough cashew nuts to get enough and chickpeas to get enough magnesium. So magnesium, and then progesterone. I mean, progesterone is magical for sleep. And anybody that tests their levels and is low in progesterone or has a low ratio like you did and is having sleep issues, you got to get some progesterone on board. And that's rubbed in. It's used at bedtime. You rub it into your skin just a little bit. A quarter teaspoon or 25 milligrams is what our bodies would make naturally. So you're replenishing. And I've had women say to me, wow, women that didn't have terrible sleep problems saying, I thought I slept all right, but man, I'm really sleeping well now. But it is.
And the cream that you guys were talk about, because that's not a specific amount. That's just like it's not a specific amount per person. It's just like, it's its own amount. Like does that make sense?
Well, it is what we're doing is matching physiology.
Oh, so okay. So that's what would be in your system.
It's a physiologic dose. Yeah. You're trying to match up with what your body should be making naturally. And some women really want to use a whole lot more because they feel so good because it's calming and it helps them sleep. And it also calms cortisol and adrenal issues. The adrenals need progesterone. All of these hormones break down to other hormones. It's a cascade. And like DHEA is the most abundant hormone in the body. It breaks down to testosterone and then to estrogen. Progesterone breaks down directly to cortisol, and it helps to balance adrenal cortisol levels. So that's where progesterone is really important. And then these other herb things, adaptogens like L-theanine, like ashwagandha, Dong Quai is great for mood swings and feeling agitated. I remember when I first was like that, 15 drops of Dong Quai and a little bit of water, just chug it, because some of these tinctures don't taste that great. But the adaptogens are so named because they help the adrenals adapt to stressors. So they nurture and strengthen adrenal function. So all of these things can help. I mean, there's nothing, but the thing is, you cannot out supplement a stressful scenario around evening and sleep. You can't, you can't be going till the bitter end and then get in bed and think that you're going to sleep. If you've been like powering right up to the end.
And I mean, and even the last few nights or as many nights I'm on my computer working, sometimes, like either downstairs with the TV on next to my husband, or, I'll just do it real quick in my office before I go up to bed. But
it's a habit. It's hard to turn off the screen in your brain.
Yeah.
And, you can't, and not being able to turn off the screen in your brain takes hours. And that's the cortisol being stuck on. And as long as cortisol is on, you're not going to sleep well. And anybody that even during the day, I know we all work on computers, but you got to take breaks. You got to get outside. You got to do deep breathing, stretching.
I crave my outside walks during the day. Yeah. I crave it.
Absolutely imperative. And that's another thing about exercise too. A lot of people don't think about the fact that stressors aren't, there's good stress. There's great career success. There's, yes, sending your kid off to college. It's a happy thing, but it's stressful. Nevertheless, birthdays, weddings, there's bad stress, all the obvious financial problems, overbooked, overcommit. But people don't realize that too much exercise, working out every day. A lot of women who are getting older in their, like late 30s, 40s, which to me is still incredibly young. I wish I were that age still. But they're working out like crazy. They're working out every day. They're under eating, they're not eating for 5 hours at a time, or they're not eating breakfast, or they're drinking caffeine on an empty stomach. And they have a full-time job. They got kids in college. They've got aging parents. The whole picture is a stress bucket.
Yeah.
You've got to empty the stress bucket in order to get calm and get to sleep. And really, people who have elevated cortisol levels that stay elevated in a chronic way start to have real problems. I mean, that's where you start to gain weight around your belly and you cannot get rid of it. Those are the people that say, I have belly fat. No matter what I do, I can't get rid of it. So they go to the gym and they spin all day, and that makes it worse.
Right.
And, these are the people who also are anxious and can't fall asleep or stay asleep. These are the people who get sick easily and don't bounce back, because the adrenals also regulate the immune system. So, being in a state of high elevated cortisol levels is not a great thing. And at a certain point, the adrenals just peg out. They can't keep up. They can't meet the demand. And at a certain point, like the lawyer who said to me, oh yeah, I was drinking at least a pot of coffee a day. She's a high powered lawyer. I love my job. I'm going. I just really get off on all that. And yet one morning I woke up and I just couldn't get out of bed. And then for the next 2 months, she couldn't get out of bed. She was so sick. Because she had run herself into the ground. So, the tired but wired, you wake up in the morning and it's really hard to get out of bed, but then at night you can't fall asleep. You're ready to run a marathon. This is a real problem for health.
I've talked to many of women that are in that boat. Yes.
And don't think, ladies, that rapid aging isn't going to happen. If, this is where, because when cortisol starts to be high, it takes over. All the other, especially in the wake of dropping estrogen and progesterone levels as we move into perimenopause and menopause, we need those hormones to control, because as I said, they interact. When they're low, cortisol goes high. So then we have this, we're suffering from imbalances of those protective hormones, and we've got stress hormones that are, kind of running the show, and we don't want that.
Real quick, just to finish that question off, On L-theanine, what time of day do you, because I have used that, I just haven't used it for a while for myself. What time of day do you recommend to take that? In the morning or at night?
Well, if you're anxious in the daytime, you can use it, but L-theanine is part of this cortisol manager
Mm-hmm.
supplement that I suggest. There are several doctors that I follow, like, I'm sure you've heard of Sarah Gottfried, who
Mm-hmm.
wrote the
Sure.
Hormone Cure, Dr. Gottfried and others. She was on Andrew Huberman recently, and they both agreed that cortisol manager is one of the best
Oh,
formulations for managing cortisol levels. So you can start to take that in the afternoon or before bed. And it's a nice blend of things like L-theanine. But people can use things like L-theanine and herbs throughout the day, like ashwagandha, to if they're anxious. And if they're tired and are pushing through the day, they can use tinctures like we suggest, Kick Ass Daily, which is a Wish Garden tincture. It has a lot of sort of uplifting adaptogens.
uh-huh.
You
Love
want
the
to use
name.
that, you wouldn't want to use that closer to bed. I mean, when we do our rebalancing guide for people, when people test with us, a lot of people talk to me, they talk to Jess. Not everyone does a consult. It's good to do one, but we also have a rebalancing guide. So we look at your results, and we're not going to suggest Kick Ass Daily later in the day or evening if you're having trouble sleeping. So,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
there are different things. Also, what is that? The Calm powder that is a
Uh-huh.
calcium magnesium can be very helpful for people at bedtime. So there's a whole realm of things that can be done, but I think it's the practicing good sleep hygiene in concert with these other things. And of
And
course,
that's
if you're,
versus just going to get a sleeping pill from a doctor, right?
yeah, because you don't,
You're having a Band-Aid versus trying to get to the roots of the
and
issue,
we're trying to, and that's the whole goal with us, right? People
right?
like you and me, we're trying to get people off that stuff and down to the cause,
Right.
and I just think people need to kind of look at their lives and admit that when you say, oh, I'm just crazy busy, is that great? Is that admirable? No, it's,
Right.
that scenario needs to be flipped around somewhat.
Right.
I think we know.
Right. Did you like the interview? Make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, and share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on their education about healthier hormones. Well, looks like it's time to go. Hope you're feeling fired up. Bye.